Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. And this is a beginning of a new era with this act, as I am joined by my permanent co-host on the Monday night version of the Sports Exchange, George Eichorn. George, it's just us, and maybe once in a while we'll allow some company in here. Glad to have us on together permanently, as it used to be back in the old days, man.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I appreciate the offer, and I'm looking forward to it very much so. And it's great being back with you again.
Oh, isn't it? I tell you one thing, George. It's always been good to have you on past editions of the Sports Exchange, but when we've had other guests here on the network. But now we have an opportunity to do it again, and my goal is to make sure that we can carry this broadcast as deep as we can. And I think one of the things that will be great about this broadcast here on Monday nights is the fact that, you know, with us both being Detroiters and you giving me my first opportunity in the business, both at WCAR when we did the Sports Exchange and WXYZ Sports Talk when we did it with Ron Cameron, that now we have an opportunity to, if you want to call this a Detroit version, we're going to bring a lot of Detroiters. We're going to open up to our hometown as well as bring it in to some outsiders. So what we're able to try to do here, to me, is just great. You know, you're the one who got me involved with the Detroit Sports Broadcasters Association. We worked together with the Detroit Monitor for a lot of years. We've covered a total of 6 Super Bowls, and all the different assignments that we've had with all the 4 major teams, the Lions, Tigers, Pistons, and Red Wings, to me, are just unbelievable. So this is just another way for us to continue to build our brand in a very, very, very big way, for sure. So I'm just glad.
Absolutely, Scott. We've done a lot together. We've done a lot working as a team. And no question about it, we've got a great history, you and I, of Detroit and Michigan sports, and plus the national scene as well, as you described, with some of the national events that we all have covered. So, I think it's going to be a great show, a great time to work together and talk about a lot of stuff going on in the world of sports.
Well, you know what? Since you've agreed to doing this, we're not going to give you one opportunity to do it. We're going to give you 2 opportunities to do it. I want everybody in our audience to let them know the title of the book that you wrote that I'm proudly involved in. You'll be able to get into more promotional stuff at the very back end. Go ahead.
Yeah. The book that I have out there is Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. And Scott and Candy have created a link, so you can just scroll down on the About Us page at the South Florida Tribune and also go down to where my photo is located. And then the link is right there. It's a live link that you click on. That'll take you directly to the publishing website called Arcadia Publishing. And you could order a copy of that book. Scott Morganoff is featured in that book. Muhammad Ali, Jimmy Connors. Oh, my gosh, the Detroit great of broadcasters like Ernie Harwell and George Kell and Ray Lane and Jim Brandstatter and Van Patrick and Bruce Smart and Bud Lynch, Ken Cal. They're all in there. And, you know, it's a good book because it's a very easy read. It's loaded with photographs, captions and photographs mostly. And what I did is try to chronicle Detroit's and Michigan's, to a certain extent, broadcasting history with that book, Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. And again, hats off to you, Scott and Candy, for creating that link. So now it's very easy for your listeners, our listeners, to click on that and to order themselves a copy directly from your website.
Well, you know, Ernie Harwell wrote the foreword, and you and I and Ernie spent a lot of time when I was back home. So Ernie, to me, as you well know, we were all close with him, but Ernie Harwell to me is like an uncle. So, you know, he treated me like family, and I always remember the times that you and I and Ernie had together. So if you're going to have a foreword written by anybody, why not Ernie Harwell for sure? So.
Exactly. Ernie was more than happy to write that foreword for me, and you know, I didn't deserve the heap of praise that he gave me, but he was such a nice, kind gentleman, as you know, as we all know, all the time, and as well as a great broadcaster. But beyond that, he was just an unbelievable human being, like you said, Scott, like an uncle to you, like a mentor and a friend to me, and so many people. And of course, we still miss Ernie to this day, as well as his wife, Miss Lulu, as well. And of course, another one that we just lost recently, Scott, that was in the book. I've got some good pictures of Al Kaline. Of course, your listeners probably may know this, but some may not, that Kaline was alongside George Kell for so many years. as the television voices of the Detroit Tigers on the local television side here in Detroit.
Right.
And so K-Line, of course, we lost Al earlier this year. Very sad. And but yeah, it's kind of a walk down memory lane, but it's also kind of in memoriam. A lot of my pictures, we've lost so many of the great guys.
Well, when you have a history like that, what do you expect? I mean, Al Kaline, George Kell were known for their play on the field, but also, what they did in the broadcast. I mean, when you think of George Kell and Al Kaline, I actually look at the ESPN broadcast, Sunday night broadcast. When you had John Miller and Joe Morgan, you had two Hall of Famers in the same booth. Why ESPN ever let those guys go is beyond my wildest imagination. That'll be for another broadcast. But what's nice about the Monday edition of the Sports Exchange is the fact that we do have a Detroit theme in many instances. It will be a national theme, but the Detroit theme, because Detroit is a great sports town, and that's where I got my start, and I got it thanks to you. But again, we're not going to ignore anything. If there's a big subject around, nationally, we're going to do it, but we also want to talk about Detroit sports as well. And we also encourage everybody to interact with us and give us feedback about what they want us to talk about. So the sky's the limit for this particular broadcast. So with that said, okay, let's talk about the topic at hand. And that tonight is the logistical challenges of covering MLB during the pandemic. You were telling me that you were a little bothered by the fact that the Detroit Tigers were only going to not give you privileges to cover games this year. Why did that bother you so much?
Well, Scott, I mean, obviously, as you know, I've covered the team for so many years. My gosh, going back to the 1980s. And, and it's a bitter pill to swallow when the Tigers have to obviously follow the guidelines of Major League Baseball. And Major League Baseball has decided that what they're going to do is just focus on the beat writers, the daily media, the deadline media, whatever you want to call them, but mostly the beat guys that cover the team day in and day out. I don't do that here in Detroit. I quite frankly, I can't do that because of my other schedule and my other job. So, what my schedule usually has been is just, get down there at least one day a week at Comerica Park. But the Tigers, like I said, are following strict MLB protocol. And MLB is not only doing safe distancing of the reporters and writers, they're also doing elimination, shall we call it, where guys that are freelancers, stringers, I call them, or part-timers like me, we are not welcome to go in person to cover the team. However, the team is making available the daily media notes and quotes and photographs from the Detroit Tigers official photographers that we could use in the Detroit Monitor or the pages of this South Florida Tribune, for example. So, it's not that they're shutting us off completely. It's just that it's not available for me, for example, to cover them in person.
Yeah, I have a very interesting situation down here with the Miami Marlins. Excuse me. And I don't really mind it at the moment because let's go back a little bit before spring. Until I've gotten in contact with the right people, I didn't have a chance to cover them during spring training. But the Marlins situation actually works out well for me. I'm involved with a lot of the Zoom calls is what I'm involved in. So I have opportunity to interview Don Mattingly and get to know a lot of the beat writers, so I'm really literally planting seeds for 2021 and letting people get to know me early on. So by the time a regular schedule comes into play, I will have laid out the groundwork. So, but the Marlins situation is what it is. The Marlins PR staff, communications people have been fantastic. They really are. I have access to anything with through Marlins pressbox.com, which is prominently featured on the MLB. So, again, they have to adhere to the same MLB protocols as what they've got to do. So, you just deal with the fact that it is a very different year based on COVID-19. And I think they're only allowed 35 people in the building per se, whether it is with the actual beat writers in the daily media. Now, the one thing that can't get lost in this whole thing is that teams are going to be going to more remote broadcasts is what they're going to be. So a lot of them won't travel on the road only at home. So it's a much different norm than what we definitely have seen. So, for me to be able to tell you right now that it's going to bother me to go down to the games, let me, excuse me, give you an example. How long of a drive is it for you from Warren, Michigan to get to Comerica Park?
Oh, it's about a 20-minute drive. Not bad at all. I mean, it's not that bad. So, no, I understand. That's the first time I heard about a number. So that's kind of the number you heard, about 35?
Yeah, right around there. I think
yeah,
give or take, I think the Marlins PR people were really good about it. So I've had to focus my dependent on Zoom calls. So if they're figuring around 35, talking about production people, and as you alluded to, George, the daily media, the beat writers, and perhaps your local broadcast in that particular area, then it might be right, give or take a couple. But that's the number that I've heard go out there. But
yeah.
So
well, that doesn't surprise me. And again, I didn't know if that was official yet about them not traveling, the media traveling out of town. Is that kind of what you heard, that the home guys won't be allowed? I mean, just to do the home games, and then the other road games they would do like from a studio?
Well, I mean, I've heard a lot of your local broadcasters. Again, I think it depends on club to club. Tell me in Detroit, now are a lot of your radio guys staying home? Well, they're probably going, but I wonder if the TV guys would actually be doing it remote. I can imagine that the radio guys would be going to the game, because how are they going to see it otherwise? But TV, I don't know how they're doing that. Whether
it's going to be different. Yeah, either way, it's going to be difficult. You're referring to Dan Dickerson and Jim Price.
Correct.
Jim's had some health issues on the radio side, so I'm not quite sure if he's even going to be up to traveling. That'll be a very hectic and bruising schedule, as you know, 60 games in such a short amount of time. So Dan Dickerson and Jim Price would be doing the radio, and obviously Matt Shepard, along with Kurt Gibson or Dan Petrie or God, I'm drawing a blank here.
Craig Monroe.
Former Tiger. Craig Monroe, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Doing it on Fox Sports Detroit. Now, that's not hard because they can go into the studio, Scott, that's located in Southfield, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit, and they got all the replays and all the bells and whistles. They can do that broadcast pretty darn good, I bet. From the Fox Sports Detroit studios on Evergreen Road in Southfield, Michigan. But you're right, radio's a little bit harder. Dickerson likes to focus on the pitches a lot, maybe to an extreme, I think. That was a changeup. No, that was a fastball. Oh, that was a curveball. Oh, that dropped in the zone.
Right.
He's really into that pitch stuff, and I'm really not into that. Ernie didn't do that kind of stuff. That wasn't, but anyways, that's just Dan's style. He likes to do that, and that's going to be difficult for him. If he does that by a television screen, you know what I mean? If he doesn't do the road games, the radio guy, Dan Dickerson, that's going to be difficult for him because, like I said, he really likes to, and they got a great view, as you know, right behind home plate. And he likes to always, comment on what kind of pitch was thrown.
Well, but you got to remember, too, George, obviously this is just a very, very unprecedented year. So he's probably thought in his mind how he'll have to alter his approach like anything else. I don't know about you, but I know that the dependence on Zoom calls that I've had, with not only my work with the Marlins and potentially other sports, has been beneficial to me because, again, getting to know the local media is setting this thing up for me later on. So, for me, I will set spring training up real well, so when I finally meet these individuals, it could present more opportunities to get them on future broadcasts. But, and I talk about 2021.
That's true. Yeah, that's very true.
So I'm actually, now bear in mind, from our studio here in Coral Springs, it's about an hour and 15-minute drive to get from here to Marlins Park, providing that you don't have to worry about rush hour traffic, and it gets expensive with tolls. So I'm dealing with 60 to 75 minutes, or if I start out from my home in Deerfield Beach, it's an hour drive. So for me, if I got to 10 or 15 Marlins games during the course of a regular season under normal circumstances, there's no way I'd be able to get down to 80 games. But again, so the logistical travel for me is a little bit more involved than it is with you, a 20-minute drive. Now, I got to tell you, for me, going to Hard Rock Stadium to cover the Dolphins is 30 minutes, not a big deal. Or to go to the BB&T Center in Sunrise is a piece of cake, but Marlins Park's a little out there because a lot of people should understand that Marlins Park is located on the site of the Orange Bowl. But yet, don't get me wrong, I love baseball, so I would go to Marlins Park and wouldn't think twice about it. But it's a much different logistics for sure. So.
Yeah, no, it is, and I agree with you. It's a little bit bigger height for you, obviously, than it is for me to Comerica Park. And speaking of ballparks, it's kind of ironic. Opening day, the Tigers are opening up against the National League team. It's just so many weird oddities, obviously, to this season, including the fact that the Tigers are going to be opening up in Cincinnati, which obviously, that never happens with rare exception now with the balance and scheduling. And I know there's interleague play, but it's very odd to start a season with American versus the National League team. But the Tigers will be opening up at Cincinnati Friday night at 6 o'clock here locally on Fox Sports Detroit. I just reread the press release, Scott, that the Fox Sports Detroit PR lady Courtney Welch put out, and she does not say anything in that release about the announcers, even their names, or whether they're going to be covering it live or from a studio. So I think that probably was a smart move on their part, seeing that things were kind of fluid. When they published the schedule, like I said, Courtney Welch, the PR lady, she did not even write up, whether Matt Shepard, Dan Petrie, Craig Monroe, Kurt Gibson are going to be on the road or not.
Yeah, ironically, believe it or not, I just got a press release from the Miami Marlins about their schedule release and their Fox Sports Florida, and they had a really detailed version about who their people will be. I think one of the challenging situations I've had to deal with, especially in the last couple of weeks since I started getting more and more involved, we've been posting a lot of their material on the South Florida Tribune, but now that I'm more involved in getting to know these people, is since I did not have the luxury of covering this team during spring training, we went out to Arizona to see 3 games, and we were really busy in March doing other things, and then the pandemic took over. I find myself having to do a lot of catching up because I didn't have the luxury of a spring training. So I've had to ask general questions and learn from the beat writers as we go along with general COVID questions and being able to incorporate baseball questions into the equation. But I got to tell you, though, George, Don Mattingly has been great to work with. He really is. I always admired him as a player, but to be able to work with a first-class professional like Don Mattingly has been really great. And I think that as we all become more and more involved with these Zoom calls, I think they're unbelievable. If you ever, I don't know, do the Tigers offer Zoom calls to the writers, and do you have access to them?
No, I don't have access to them. Again, they limit it to the daily media. But yeah, they have Zoom calls every day after every workout. Ron Gardenhire, the manager, of course, is on it. And then usually 2 or 3 players, a pitcher and whoever else perhaps might have had a significant showing in that inter-squad game that they've been having every day, these inter-squad games. So like I said, yeah, they do make that available to the regular press. Unfortunately, again, I don't qualify in their sense, so it's okay. But, they put Ron Gardenhire in front of a camera, but it's all done via Zoom, like you said, that Mattingly does too. So it's the best way to get the coverage out. And, the local TV stations here in Detroit, like Channel 2, 4, and 7, they'll show a clip of that every single day of, Gardenhire speaking, or whether it's Matthew Boyd, who's going to start the opener Friday night, or it could be Michael Fulmer, who's coming back from Tommy John surgery. It's timely stuff. Even these couple of these rookies that the Tigers had. This Ricky Green, I mean, some of these rookies did some nice things.
You're talking about Riley Green? You're talking about Riley Green.
Green. I'm sorry.
No, that's
Riley
okay.
Green. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
And he was just sent down, by the way, to Toledo today. The Tigers sent, I believe, 17 guys, something like that, down to Toledo as they trimmed their roster from that 60 that they had. Every team has. And then the Tigers are doing a smart thing by continuing the summer camp, if you will, down in Toledo, which I think is a real good thing. I'm glad that was one of the agreements that the players and the owners had, and the commissioner, is to keep that expanded roster and keep those guys still working out. I guess most teams will do the same, Scott, at their top AAA affiliate, maybe?
Well, AAA in some cases, but not so much in the case of the Marlins. I got to tell you, though, before I answer that question, the Marlins PR people have been fantastic. They have made what they've done to provide the South Florida Tribune with content, not only via press release, but allowing me to gather information, because I've told their PR people, not only am I getting the full benefit, at least during summer camp, but I've told them I'm incorporating this material on all of my broadcasts. And when you think about it, okay, I've got 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, which just preceded this broadcast in the Sports Exchange, and to be able to utilize that material along with other broadcasts on the network has been absolutely fantastic. That's how you go ahead and feed this thing. So the Marlins PR staff communications have been fantastic. Now, in terms of where the Marlins are using, they're actually using Roger Dean Stadium out in Jupiter, their spring training facility, because that's only an hour up the road off of I-95. And that's where, so they have a first-class facility there. So you're only talking an hour right up the road. So, so either way, they're trying to keep them within an hour for sure.
No, that's a good thing. And like I said, Detroit's got, made their first cuts today, and as the other teams are doing the same. So this taxi squad, whatever you want to call it, is going to be just same for Detroit, hour and a half away, being in Toledo, Ohio, where the home of the Mudheads.
Right.
And basically, I think that without the farm system this year, I mean, it's a small thing, but I think it's obviously the next best thing to having your AAA, AA, single A, whatever. I mean, they can't do all that this year, but having the fact that just a stone's throw away for most teams is going to be a bigger roster. And not only that, but those guys get a chance to work out, to do inter-squad games, and to get some of their skills built up.
Yeah, as I've talked to you on this broadcast, and I have to say this, I am kind of surprised a little bit that the Tigers don't make it open to all of the media, or at least a lot more than what your daily people are. That to me is kind of mind-boggling. Doesn't mean that everybody's going to get a question in unless they're trying to curtail the time. I mean, the format's the same. They try to get 2 or 3 players as well as the manager. I mean, but, I guess every club does it differently, but I'm just thankful that we have access to it. So, I don't know. I'm not going to criticize the Tigers. They're an organization.
And even teams, you've got a good market down there in Miami, but I mean, even these teams like, can you imagine New York, Boston, LA? I mean, their decisions must have been even more difficult than, I'm saying, Detroit, the smaller, a mid-sized market, if you will, as opposed to a large market. Teams in Chicago and Philadelphia and Boston, like I said, and those are tough decisions with so many media, wanting to cover those teams, even greater than Detroit and greater than Miami, if you will.
Yeah, even on the Zoom calls. But then again, every Zoom call depends on the organization, the market, and the demand for who you're going to invite in. But I'll tell you what I've learned about these Zoom calls, to me, is unbelievable for sure. And again, it's all about getting the news out there to your fan base any way that you can get it out there. And they obviously know what they feel is important. But so let's talk about the logistics of covering MLB in 2020. How are they promoting it on Fox Sports?
Well, I mean, obviously, probably the other Fox stations and regional TV networks have been doing the same thing. They've been doing a constant barrage of old-time highlights, old games. Detroit, of course, hosted that All-Star game in '71 when Reggie Jackson hit that mammoth home run off the light tower in Tiger Stadium. That game was shown. The All-Star game in Comerica Park, which I attended and covered, was shown. They showed the World Series, Detroit's World Series from '68 and '84. So the local affiliate has been doing a good job here in Detroit, the rights holder, to Fox Sports, of keeping the interest. Okay, that was important, Scott, is to keep the interest for the fans, keep their appetites wet, if you will. And same with the radio affiliates, which is called 97.1 The Ticket, WXYT. They would play games. They would replay Tiger games on Saturdays and Sundays, and they picked out a lot of old ones, but a lot of the ones they picked out were from '06 and '12. Remember when the Tigers made the World Series both years?
Right.
And they picked out games such as the Division Series games or the LCS, and then even some of the World Series, of course. So I think as far as the preparation goes, it was key to keep the fans' appetite going. And I'll say the same for the local media. The Detroit News and Free Press have done a good job. And right now, of course, like the local papers, they're treating it like spring training. They're doing a feature every day on one of the Tiger players. Some of them are fighting for roster spots. Some are veterans that know they made the roster. But every day, the News and Free Press, of course, does a story or two on players, Tiger players. So, they're getting the access they need, I believe. And once the season starts on Friday for the Tigers, I think you're going to see just as much coverage, if not more, for baseball than we've seen. I heard the other day, no, not the other day, I'm sorry, the Chicago White Sox and the Cubs played, the inter-squad game yesterday, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
And they said the ratings on radio were the best for a White Sox game in more than 8 seasons.
No kidding.
And,
really?
And that's just for an inter-squad game. Of course, they're playing their arch rival, the Cubs. But,
right.
Yeah. So that's just one bit of facts that I heard, at least as far as the broadcast goes. And I'm glad that ESPN has shown some of these inter-squad games, too. I know the Tigers and the Reds and other teams are playing exhibition games now, but I don't mean inter-squad games. I'm sorry, these are exhibition games.
Right.
That ESPN and MLB Network have shown. And hats off, too, Scott, to Fox. They're doing a triple header on Fox over the air network. The national Fox is doing 3 games on Saturday. So I'm very happy about that. 1 at 1, 1 at 4, and 1 at 7. They just hope none of them go into extra innings.
Oh, yeah, well, we'll get into that in a few minutes. Amazingly enough, how you talk about that, and I look at the fact that you're finding it hard to believe that the Tigers are opening up against a National League opponent. Remember, Candy Ebling and I, saw the Detroit Tigers and the Miami Marlins finish the last series against American National League. In fact, not only did we see it once, but twice. When we went up to Milwaukee, they finished up with a 3-game series at the Milwaukee Brewers. And then here in Miami at Marlins Park, I was able to watch that whole 3-game series, and it was pretty neat. Yet the Marlins swept the Tigers, and Henderson Alvarez went ahead and pitched that no-hitter. And I was at opening day actually in Miami, now that I think about it, when Justin Verlander, the Tigers played the Marlins for an opening day series here in Miami. So it's not uncommon to have opening days, for interleague play.
No, that's true. The Tigers again, and the Marlins. And I remember the Tigers had to finish the season with the Atlanta Braves.
Right.
Remember that one year they closed Turner Field?
Uh-huh.
And the Tigers were part of that as they played their last game down there. But, yeah, it's not unusual. one of the big changes, of course, everybody knows this season, Scott, is going to be, what are your thoughts, too, on the designated hitter for both leagues?
Well, I talked to Don Mattingly about that, George, and he expects it within a couple of years to be permanent. And because everybody's favoring more towards scoring. So here's a manager who played with the Yankees. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it becomes permanent. But, yeah, you've got to save pitching staffs, what you have to do. So, I guess I'm okay with it. I still like the pitchers hitting in the National League. But, again, we're talking about a year where, well, you mentioned it before, a man at second base in extra innings, which, that rule's a one and done after this year. But if you're going to experiment with a lot of different rule changes, you might as well do it during a 60-game season. Because I asked Don Mattingly, I asked him, Don, because I think Stuart Hackett brought this up, does a pitcher still get a perfect game even though there's a man on second base in extra innings? And Don Mattingly said, yeah, it's not his fault. I'd say he gets a perfect game. Then again, would you expect the manager to go to bat, so to speak, for his pitcher? So, I don't know. Yeah. Universal DH is something that nearly was voted on many years ago. I think it was in the 1980s, but it didn't come to fruition. And I don't know, Sparky Anderson hated the designated hitter when he was with the Reds, but meanwhile he lived with it when he was with the Detroit Tigers, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's a good point you just made, because Sparky, of course, just a rare feat for any manager to win the World Series in both leagues, as you mentioned, with the Cincinnati Reds and the Tigers. And I think that the DH, I've come to like it. And I was a traditionalist too. And my gosh, I mean, what Mickey Olich did. Remember, Scott, in the '68 World Series, here you got this great pitcher. He won 3 games, and not only that, but doggone it, guy hits a home run too.
Right.
Mickey Olich in the World Series. I mean, you can't get much more exciting than that. And there have been other examples too of didn't Kerry Wood hit one in a big game for the Cubs, I believe, in the playoffs?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. Now that you bring it up,
I thought, that series against the Marlins, wasn't it?
I'm quite sure it was. Don't know off the top of my head, but I think Kerry Wood did.
Yeah, but I mean, other pitchers have done it as well, as we know. Even though it's few and far between. And you remember, Scott, we had a guy in Detroit. Remember Earl Wilson? And boy, that guy could swing a mean bat. The Tigers' starting pitcher, Earl Wilson.
Well, it's funny how you bring up Earl Wilson. My dad took me to Game 3 of the 1968 World Series, and Earl Wilson was a pitcher.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, he
That's
did.
A great.
I asked my dad about that a long time ago, and he said, "Yeah, I took it to Game 3 of the 1968 World Series when Earl Wilson was on the hill. Of course, they lost, but to be able to go to a World Series game as a kid, and like I said, and you said too that it's bound to happen. Mattingly kind of hinted at it, and I think he's spot on, and it's gonna fade out, and they're going to go to the universal DH. And you got to remember, the rivalries, I don't think is there like it used to be, the National versus the American League. Because remember, Scott, in the old days, they had their own set of umpires. Oh, yeah.
The National League, they had their National League guys. Remember, American had their guys. And then, for special events like the All-Star Game of the World Series, they would rotate. One National League guy would be behind home plate. The American League guy would be at first. National League guy at second. I mean, they and they kept all that protocol stuff. And remember how powerful those presidents were of the leagues? Mm-hmm. We had a guy named Joe Cronin. The great Joe Cronin was American League president, and Chubb Feeney, remember, National League president.
Right.
And they had, it was like their little empire. I mean, it was cool. Because, you'd only see those teams in the World Series or spring training. They'd play each other, but you know what I mean? The All-Star game. But I like that rivalry, the way it was so sacred. Remember back when we were younger?
Well, that's true, because you only saw it so limited, but let's not kid yourself. Bud Selig was the driving force behind interleague play, and you can't downplay the fact that the attendance figures have gone up because of interleague play when you look at a lot of your city rival, like the Chicago White Sox and the Cubs, the Mets and the Yankees, the Dodgers and the Angels. Interleague play has been a boon for attendance for sure. And I think what will make this year interesting is that you're going to see the Tigers and the Milwaukee Brewers playing. And again, back in the day before the Brewers went to the National League, you're talking about the, as Chris Berman would say, the Norris division, right, of the NFL Norris. So you have a lot of those teams, like
sure.
the Twins and the Tigers are already playing. Then you have, of course, the Tigers and the White Sox. But now you bring in Milwaukee into the picture, and you pretty much have already brought in your NFC Norris division. I love the way Chris Berman talks about it. So.
Yeah, it should be interesting. The Tigers are going to get a steady diet of Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, who else? The Cubs,
right?
St. Louis, and Milwaukee, right?
Right. Well, you're talking about basically the Midwest is really what you're looking at for one.
Yep.
And the American League East, and get this, to talk about the unprecedented 2020 season. Everybody in the NL East takes on the NL East, AL East. They don't even leave the time zone, George. They don't. And the West Coast is what it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. Detroit has two time zones, being Eastern and Central Time. But you're right. I didn't even think about that for the East. They're staying obviously all within the Eastern, and it's going to be interesting because they're obviously there's so much rivalry, between those great series, the Yankees and Mets, and the Cubs and the White Sox and the Angels and the Dodgers. I mean, the Astros and the Rangers. I mean, there's some great natural rivals in the States. Oh, did I say Tampa against Miami?
Well, I don't know. Do you call that a rivalry? Yeah, it's an in-state rivalry.
Just joking.
Oh, I know. Well, hey, listen, don't kid yourself. I mean, you have your two biggest cities in the state, so why not? Now, in terms of low payroll, low attendance, but it still exists in the state. So, which beckons me to ask you this. Okay, we're looking at the way everything is being scheduled this year. I know a realignment is something that could be inevitable down the road. And I know that there will be expansion at some point where you want to even out the leagues to have you have 16 and 16 to have 32. What are your thoughts about that? That we could be seeing certain rivalries. What will they do? A major realignment, move teams from one league to another? Because it always.
No, I don't know if I'm in favor of that, Scott, because, I think, again, going back again to what I said about the American League versus the National League, I don't know if I'm in favor of that, putting both New York teams in the same division, both Florida teams, or it's not a good example, but the Chicago teams in the same division, and then L.A. and Anaheim, well, they're in L.A.
Right, no, I hear you.
But I'm not a big fan of that. Expansion, yeah, I think one of the areas they're probably going to look at is Raleigh or Charlotte. I think Carolina probably, might get a franchise.
Rick Curry will love you for that. That's because he will. But.
Yeah, I know.
And now, of course, Dave Dombrowski's lined up on the Nashville side too, isn't he? Where he's trying to get a team in Nashville. And Las Vegas is always considered it.
No, that's true. And there's other teams that have been mentioned over the years, such as Buffalo and Portland, Oregon, and maybe cities like that.
Well, Montreal, you can't forget them, but they need a stadium.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Montreal, yeah. Well, Vancouver, but I don't know. I guess Vancouver is a great hockey town, but...
yeah, I don't see Vancouver. But here, think about it.
But they had the NBA franchise, didn't they, for a few years, remember?
Yeah, and it obviously migrated south of the border over to Memphis. So, but let's talk about some realignment. I know that's something we hadn't talked about, but I think you're bringing up some interesting points. Okay. If indeed Montreal gets another team, then you got they would have to go to the American League so that you have the Montreal Expos and Toronto Blue Jays. That's the only way you can do it there to attract any fans. There's no way they'd make it in the National League. That would be one.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, that you would have to probably set that up for that. That would be one exception. Even though the National League heritage, Montreal had a National League team, it's been so long since they had that team.
But to be able to get Toronto and Montreal to play in baseball, that helps out a lot. Now, think about states that own a league, okay? Let's talk about Texas. You don't have any National League teams in Texas, do you? The Astros and the Rangers. And, then, of course, meanwhile in Pennsylvania, you've got the Pirates and the Phillies that own Pennsylvania. I'm talking about states.
Yeah,
so, it's not uncommon for a state to own teams within it. But, again, I know we're getting a little far-fetched a little bit, but it's certainly something to bring into play. And we'll talk about expansion at a later date. So, but let's
and although there are two different states, you think about Milwaukee and the Cubs. What a great rivalry, because obviously they're not too far from each other as far as travel goes. So
45 minutes.
That was a smart move, I think, putting the Brewers back in the National League.
Well, and they have a good history with the Cubs, although it's not like the Brewers' history with the White Sox was bad. It's just a whole lot better with the Cubs because, as I understand the logistics at Miller Park, Miller Park holds like 45,000 or so, 40,000 plus, and the Cubbies travel real well. So I know the Brewers benefit at the gate with the Cubs being such close by, for sure. But, you have a lot of interesting matchups this year. You're going to have the Twins and the Brewers, and, of course, the Brewers and the Tigers, and, of course, the Brewers taking on the White Sox and the Cubs. So you definitely have a lot of logistics. So let's talk, as we look at this broadcast in general, are you going to miss not being at the press box this year, knowing full well that maybe you take a year off?
Well, yeah, I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss a lot of my friends that I see there, obviously covering the team, and there have been a lot of people. There's been a lot of change, of course, the last several years with different reporters, changing hats or switching or retiring, and in some sense, some of them that are not there anymore. But I guess I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss the workers. I'm going to miss the hot dog vendors. We're going to miss the atmosphere of the Tigers in any ball game. Any major league team, of course, has their own atmosphere with everything that goes on at one of the games, and the highlights could be anything from on the field to off the field. But I think that, personally speaking, I'm going to miss that, but I'll be following them regularly and still reporting and writing on them and doing all the good things that I need to do to keep tabs on the team. And, I think the Tigers are one of those dark horses that, in the sense of, can a team get off to a hot start? And, you and I know, we've covered this game of baseball for many, many years. It goes without saying that there are streaks, and there are lots of streaks. And some teams are streaky at the beginning of the year, and others turn it on at the end of the year. But, in the case of a team like the Tigers, obviously, they'd have to go on quite a roll to get started. But, Vila did a nice job. He tinkered with the roster. Scopes is a good fella. Romine's good. He got Cameron Maben back. He made some nice acquisitions, I feel, during the offseason. And, the pitching looks better, but obviously with Zimmerman out, but nobody's really expecting much from Zimmerman. He's had such a rotten last couple of years with his injuries and everything. So, it could be fun. It could be fun. It's going to be weird without any fans there, but the Tigers could be a dark horse, but chances are they probably won't be. But, hey, people can dream, can't they?
Yeah, why not? Well, I think the Tigers benefited from COVID-19 with George Zimmerman because they'd have been on the hook for his entire contract. Now they only get the prorated portion. So
that's a good point, Scott.
Yeah, 45 day injured list for him. If they get sniffed the postseason, is he worth a few innings? I don't know, but but there sometimes teams have contracts that work out. Sometimes they don't. I know the one thing that the Tigers have to look forward to is you got Casey Mize. Does he see any action? Spencer Torkelson. Now, again, they don't want to get involved with service time issues where you lose a guy prematurely right now. So do they wait 7 to 10 days or whatever and then bring him up and see what the guy can do? I mean, that remains another story altogether.
Yeah. I mean, they sent a bunch of the kids down today, and you're right. You don't want to lose that 1 year of eligibility for a short frame. However, there is something to be said, like you said. What is that 7 or 10 day rule where they could, if they bring up a youngster, put him on the active roster, it's not going to count for full service here, correct? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's what I'm alluding to. So, why not get a...
Yeah, but again, I would still err on the side of caution with these kids because I don't know. I mean, he has faced major league hitting in the case of Mize, Manning, another one, Faedo, and this other guy, Scruple. These kids they have live arms, and they're not really youngsters anymore. Like somebody said here in Detroit the other day, my God, the kids are 22, 23. I mean, they pitched quite a while already, albeit in the minor leagues or for their college teams. But the Tigers do have a good future, and it'd be interesting to see, like you said, if they decide to move a couple of these guys up. It can't hurt too much unless they get battered around too much, and then obviously, you don't want that to happen where they lose their confidence if they get hit too hard. But then again, you could always obviously send them back down to the taxi squad or whatever they're going to call that in Toledo. So I think that's a possibility for Detroit, as I'm sure other teams are considering the same thing, Scott, is to showcase or allow, if you will, some of their hot prospects a chance in this shortened year.
Well, of course. I mean, think about it. What do you use spring training for? This is basically the equivalent to an expanded spring training, only these games do count in the standings. They really do.
Correct.
So, again, if you're a team that isn't going to be in it very long, then do you go ahead and utilize this year as an opportunity to get these guys experience? I don't know. I think teams will probably know within 2 or 3 weeks. I think the trade deadline is later August, I think. So I know the one guy I hope the Tigers don't let go right away is they need to keep Matt Boyd. For them to trade Matt Boyd before his contract is up in 2022 would be a huge mistake. This guy's a horse.
Yeah, he is, and yet he is the likeliest candidate according to MLB.com. I read an article the other day, and they listed one player from every team to be moved, and of course Matt Boyd was the choice of this writer at MLB.com to be the Tiger to be moved. But I agree with you. It would be different if these other guys were ready right now, these youngsters, the pitching that they drafted, the Mizes and the Mannings of the world, if they were ready now, I'd say, yeah, I would maybe consider a trade for Boyd. But I'm with you. I think that it's going to be not the best thing to do if they move him right now. I agree with you.
I think Matt Boyd's a guy that you can build around for a long time. It's too hard to get talent when you finally mold them and then you get them to where they're sharp and then they benefit other teams. Again, one of the intriguing matchups with the Tigers in Cincinnati is you get to see an old friend, Nicholas Castellanos, who did not want to who went to the Cincinnati Reds to play in the field, but meanwhile he's probably going to be a designated hitter for him. Sorry, Nick, you'll have to wait another year for your defense. Or
yeah, for sure. And we all know that Nick leaves a lot to be desired as a defensive outfielder.
He's a liability.
And, liability is more like it, right?
Yeah. But he's just going to have to carry the big stick and wait a year and hone his defensive skills later on. So, again, I know how much you're going to miss it. For me, I guess the one thing I was hoping to do more of which obviously I have no problem. I'm kind of looking forward to doing a lot more with the Marlins in the 2021 year. Being able to get to know a lot of these people from scratch and just feeling my way around. I think that, to me, is something I'm really totally content with. So,
that's great. That's great.
And I've had a lot of good memories over at Marlins Park, as I have being a lifelong Metro Detroiter for sure. So, George, what can I tell you? We're going to have a lot of fun with this broadcast. Is there anything else you want to mention about the 2020 season, knowing full well that we're depending on remote broadcasts and how you go about watching MLB in 2020? And for that matter, why don't you give me some predictions about who do you think will win the whole thing?
Well, I'm still going with, I still think the Yankees are the best in the American League, and I know Candy will want me to say the Milwaukee Brewers in the National League, but, the Dodgers and their loyal fans have been waiting for so long. I'm thinking that the Dodgers-Yankees would make a hell of a World Series. And it's just going to be interesting because, like I said earlier, if a team gets hot, look out. All bets are off. You don't know who could come out of where. There's all kinds of, talk. Some people are big eye on the Indians. They think the Indians might make it to the World Series. I don't know. It's going to be a crapshoot, but I'm going to go with the Yankees and the Dodgers, with the Dodgers to win it all.
Really? Dodgers to win it all. Okay. I'll go with the matchup.
How about you?
I'll go with the same matchup, Dodgers and the Yankees, with New York winning it all. But the fact that you're going with the Dodgers tells me that you're dating back to, I talked about Back to the Future, Back to the Past, so I'm going to stay consistent with that theme here tonight. Okay? I remember you and I a long time ago over at the Northland Theaters were watching Back to the Future, the movie. That's the first time I ever saw it. And you and I have had a lot of great memories, but we're going to take the Back to the Past. Where in 1981, the Dodgers were not the best team. The Cincinnati Reds should have made it, but they didn't because of the split season, and the Dodgers ended up winning it all. So you have a shortened season then with the Dodgers winning it all, and if history repeats itself, a shortened season with the Dodgers winning it all in 2020.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. And Kirk Gibson with that famous home run trot in the 1981 World Series. We'll never forget that, will we?
Well, wait. He was in 1988.
Oh, I'm sorry, 88.
No,
I'm sorry, 88.
No, that's no big deal. There's a history between the Tigers and the Dodgers. Not a big deal. But no, 1981. In fact, I remember meeting Tom Lasorda after the 1981 baseball winter meetings at Diplomat Hotel. And yet the Reds had the best record. But Gibby got his in 88 with the Dodgers. He got it in 84 with the Tigers. So I'm going to go with the Yankees. And we'll call it, Louis Adio Weiss had a great line for it called the Corona World Series. And I call it I call it the Bury the Astros series, because if the Yankees were to win it all, then number 28 you bury the Astros because they're a iconic franchise. Of course, the Dodgers win it, you can still bury the Astros. So there you have it, folks.
1981, the Yankees and the Dodgers. You're right, and Fernando Valenzuela. How could I ever forget? What an unbelievable year he had. Remember that year as the great starting pitcher, the anchor of that Dodgers pitching staff.
So if things come full circle, we could be looking at Dodgers and Yankees. I'm gonna go on the side of the Bronx Bombers. George Eichorn gets to go along with the guys from Hollywood looking for a Hollywood ending. And you know what? Here on the Sports Exchange tonight, this may not be a Hollywood ending, but this is a Motown starter for us as we look to take this broadcast really deep into what we know we can do. As I said, while there may be a Detroit theme, George and I are going to talk. We will not dodge any important thing whatsoever. So we're looking forward to seeing us grow our brand through and keep the legacy going for the Detroit sports broadcasters and Detroit sports media. So with that said, as we wind down the broadcast, George, why don't you go ahead and let people know how they can go ahead and get a hold of you.
Okay, SouthFloridaTribune.com. My profile is there under About Us. you can get a hold of me at geichorn@yahoo.com, and you can order a copy of my book, Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, with an introduction by Ernie Harwell. There's a link underneath my profile right on the SouthFloridaTribune.com about page, and like I said, if you want to send me information on things you're interested in us talking about here on the show, just contact Scott or contact me at geichorn@yahoo.com, and we'll be happy to think about some program topics. We're going to have a great time, Scott, on these Monday night shows of Sports Exchange.
You bet. Well, again, folks, just a little history lesson with George and I. We started working on Sports Talk with Ron Cameron in 1979. And I'll tell you, the guy that actually made it happen was Sam Greenblatt a long time ago. Yeah. And I am always indebted to Ron Cameron, even though at times he could be challenging to work with, but I still have a soft spot for the guy nonetheless. Sports Talk, WXYZ Radio. And you and I took the Sports Exchange to levels where we did a 6-hour broadcast on the weekends. Once upon a time, we took it on Sunday nights. We took the Sports Exchange to levels back then, and now we're continuing it here in 2020. And we expect to recreate the magic that we've had and in the past. But to get a hold of us here, you can reach us at Tribune South. Like our page, South Florida Tribune on Facebook. Instagram, South Florida Tribune Gets It Done. We have a YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. The website, as George alluded to, was www.southfloridatribune.com. And you can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth. If you go ahead and connect with me, I'll be more than happy to connect with you. You are listening to the Sports Exchange on the WSAN network. And you can also find the show wherever you get your podcasts. And some of the main places that you can find it is on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts. You subscribe to this broadcast, and you'll get the regular updates. So, George, great first act with us tonight. Major League Baseball will definitely be covered much differently. Hopefully normalcy will take place in 2021. But the one thing we agree on a lot of things that we hope that everybody out there goes ahead, mask up, be safe, use common sense, take COVID-19 very seriously. And I'm looking forward to seeing us pick up where we left off many years ago. I know you've made occasional appearances, but now we have something that we can work on and improve in the coming weeks ahead and months and whatever. We're going to keep this going as long as we can do it. So great to recreate the Sports Exchange. George, God bless. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah. No, I just want to wish everybody a great opening week of baseball in the major leagues. Enjoy the games this week, this Friday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, as they open up the season. And we're looking forward to the return of Major League Baseball. So thanks again, Scott.
Oh, George, it's been a pleasure. So on behalf of George Eichorn, my co-host here on the Sports Exchange, this is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, wishing you a good night, and we will see you next week. Good night, everybody.